Renee's done all the hard work. Thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you very, very much for your being here and for the invitation, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, friends. I'm going to be talking about a program called HERA. HERA is an acronym for High Impact Entrepreneurs from Emerging Regions for Action. HIEERA-S. HERAs, if you like, plural. Now, this is a program that was launched about 3 years ago at the UN House. You see some dignitaries there. The erstwhile Minister of Commerce and Industries, Sri Suresh Prabhu, launched this program. This is a take on entrepreneurial behaviors. This really is about behaviors. Now, how is it that entrepreneurs behave? How is it that entrepreneurs come together and form behavioral value chains on the strength of which business value chains develop? This is really not so much about access to markets, technology, and finance, one after the other in sequence or in parallel. It's about the behaviors that host that sequence or those events happening in parallel. So this is about business behaviors. And we're going to talk about some of these behaviors. We already know these behaviors. It's not rocket science. It's very, very simple. All we have to do is just watch ourselves. When it comes to opportunity seeking, what typically are the behaviors that precede opportunity seeking? What might those behaviors be? Could it be information seeking? Could it be goal setting? Could it be systematic planning and monitoring of behaviors? Of what it is that we see and glean around from the environment? Could it be a combination of these? So there is a cluster of behaviors that we might want to categorize as planning behaviors. That comes from one of the final slides of Renee's presentation earlier as well. A reference to the stuff that's in the basement, that's not usually seen, the foundational aspects of a business. And if a business needs to go up 100 floors, it first needs to go down, strengthen the foundation of perhaps 20 floors. It needs to go down first. Dig down to build up. So this is really about the planning cluster of behaviors. So goal setting, information seeking, systematic planning and monitoring. And I'm going to talk about a little about goal setting. I'm not going to obviously dwell on these behaviors, but I'm just going to lay them out for you to think about. Sometimes goals are finite, defined. Sometimes they are not. And when Alexander conquered most of the civilized world, as he knew it at that time, and when he ran out of land to conquer, what's the thing that he did? He cried, because he ran out of land to conquer. And then he goes back to his guru, Aristotle, and asks, what have I done wrong? I set for myself a goal. I got there in the end, and I find that goal has no meaning for me anymore. Perhaps I haven't asked the question why before I started out. Perhaps for me, setting a finite goal doesn't really have as much relevance as playing the infinite game, right? And Aristotle helps and talks about atelism, atelic goals that are bounded by infinite, not finite. So could you think of a goal that you would have set for yourself that's an infinite goal in the recent past? Not about taking your sales from 100 crores to 115 crores. Let's say, setting up a startup, moving from foundation to production, for example. What could be an example of an infinite goal? Let's examine this. Move along. All right. Fair enough. Let's move quickly to yes. So as we're doing this at a personal level, we're also moving up. We have certain personal indicators. We're also moving to enterprise level indicators. We find that the behaviors that play out at a personal level rub off at an enterprise level as well. If the founder, for example, is playing an infinite game at a personal level, working on, for example, processes that matter, working on quality consciousness, working on customer delight. Yes? Some of those behaviors would potentially rub off at an organizational level as well. So you'd see personal indicators also mirror enterprise indicators, which potentially could also fold up into district level competitiveness, district competitiveness and resilience, because we're talking to one district on a product. What good is an ODOC if it doesn't have the enterprises that support ODOC? So it means enterprises, and enterprises are people, right? And then of course state and national. Let's quickly run through what we do with HERAs, just before this. So, look at it as a HERA is also a diamond, right? So the first thing we need to do is to mine a diamond. Find a diamond, mine that diamond. And who might be a HERA? Who might be a HERA entrepreneur? Who might be a person who's alive to understanding that behaviors are important for successful entrepreneurial outcome? Who might be such a person? A person who might understand that goals could potentially be atelic, understand that relativism trumps absolutism and emotivism, for example, or a person who potentially who could relate to the idea that I don't want to sound esoteric here, but if you look at the last time that you took a decision, a business decision or a personal decision, chances are you stimulated by an environmental cue, and which may have triggered you to think about a certain behavior that needs to be responded to, an environmental behavior. Now, COVID, for example, was a very, very strong cue that came upon us a few years ago. Some people reacted, some people responded. Right? And there's a difference. Right? So a response is different from a reaction. Reaction is possibly instinctive. Sometimes through conditioning, understanding of habit formation, for example. I might respond to certain things in a certain way based on how I've learned to respond to certain things in a certain way. Potentially become things move from behavior to habit and habit to character. Now, why might I not take some of those behaviors and start reflecting on what might be the appropriate responses rather than reactions, and work on those? And that takes us to the practice. So the polishing is about the practice. So this is an end by itself. It's an output by itself. It's not outcome. The idea is to stay away from outcome biases. So the practice is the polishing, and this is a polishing that we do as the HERA community. There are some HERAs here who would like to potentially invest with other HERAs from Nagaland, and we just talked about that in a little bit. So once that happens, once you're analyzing, once you're reflecting, Soren Kierkegaard, a famous philosopher, once mentioned that life is lived forward but can only be understood backward. So the idea is to understand chains of behaviors that have led to certain decisions, that have led to certain outcomes, and ultimately promotion of the HERAs through a cluster of behaviors that we refer to as persuasion and networking. Okay? Alright, so let's quickly look at what else we have. Yeah, please. Alright, so we have workshops that help us understand and sensitize ourselves with these behaviors. It's not culture consciousness. Let's move on. There's a gym. And a gym is not a physical gym, it's a gym in the mind, of the mind really, where we dip in to empty the cup. We're not really looking at ways in which we could strengthen ego consciousness. It's more about understanding where we stand with respect to the environment around us. So there's a regular practice that happens there. We observe what happens. And this observation happens at a gym level. For the gym, it also happens for individual members in the gym who are practicing on a regular basis. Let's move on. Right, so these would, for example, be fairly recent statistics in the gym. Now, what's happening really is that decisions taken by entrepreneurs, by heroes, are marked out by stories that heroes submit in the gym. And then there are other heroes that respond to such stories and say, oh, well, I don't quite see the business decision that you took or a personal decision that you may have taken the same way that you see it. Now, this is important from a relativism perspective because, I might have a certain way of looking at the world. Sure, the world looks at me the way I look at myself. My self-image and reflection would be two very different things, right? So it's important to get feedback. Trust is based on feedback. It's based on ask and tell. If I don't say, I don't receive. And if I'm saying what I think about certain behaviors I've observed, I'm not judging. But what I'm doing is I'm actually reflecting the behaviors that I see. Yes, thank you. That's where we are. Fairly early in India. We started in 2013 at the request of the Development Commissioner's Office of the Government of India. This program is in 50 countries now. India is the 34th country to have requested this program. Formally, the Division of Investment and Enterprise of UNCTAD Geneva runs this process in the countries that I mentioned. And you have heroes from various countries who are working and collaborating and trying to build business linkages. We feel, actually we know this, that in many of the sub-Saharan African countries, also in Latin America, the program is very strong. Heroes work, high-impact entrepreneurs work with each other by observing behaviors first. If you take this context of a banker, for example, my father's been a banker all his career. I've been an investment banker as well, who was based in Geneva before I came back to India with this program. I can tell you there are some bankers who have this innate ability to understand someone who's requesting a loan. In the 20 seconds, the person walks up, right, to have an interaction with the manager. In the 20 seconds, that's enough time for the bank manager to understand whether the first thing the chap is going to do when he gets the loan disbursed is going to get state-of-the-art refrigerator or a color TV or something else. So mixing up companies' money with personal money, corporate governance standards, environmental sensitivities, human rights in business, all ultimately outcomes of decisions that we take, and they manifest in behavior. Now let's understand, behavior is not just action. Sometimes we refer to behavior as action. A person's behaving a certain way means the person's acting a certain way. That's just the tip of the surface. It's really the intent behind the action that makes for behavior. It's not easy to get there. For example, if I were to ask you, what are you doing? It's easy to understand what you're doing. You're just sitting here, you're trying to listen to a very, very boring speech. Yes, and you're trying to keep up appearances, and you're being polite, you're not leaving, stuff like that. Now, why are you doing what you're doing? That's a difficult one. Why? Why are you here? Why am I here? Now, unless we interact, unless we get deeper into this whole process, it's difficult. So one of the things that we train ourselves with is in observing, understanding, and recognizing behaviors. Imagine we all had that innate X-ray vision of that banker who'd be able to tell whether this guy can be trusted or not. This is going to go two ways. Have you had this ever happen to you? A scooter in front of you, give a left indicator and then go right. Yes? Yes? Okay. So those are the people you want to stay away from. Great. So there are people, as I said, there are 50 countries where the program is currently running. And in all of these countries, there is a very strong Empretec center. Empretec is Emprendedore Tecnologia, Spanish for technology for entrepreneurship. Spanish words because it started in Latin America. 82 to 88 is when they piloted various experiments and understood that, okay, these are behaviors that can potentially condense into fairly understandable chunks of behaviors. So I mentioned the planning cluster of behaviors. The part of the house that's under the ground, the part of the house that is usually not visible. The second set of behaviors is achievement. It's to do with achievement behaviors. Demand for efficiency and quality. Quality consciousness is one of those achievement behaviors. Calculated risk-taking is one of those behaviors. Now, calculated risk-taking also implies that I understand the difference between risk and uncertainty. And there are many entrepreneurs that mix them up. And it's easy to mix up risk and uncertainty. One can be measured, one may not be measured. It's a 200-year-old science called statistics. It's to do with risk-taking, not to do with uncertainty. Okay? So this is what we do in the gym. This is fairly internal. Let's quickly pass over Swifts. We're constantly discussing, researching, getting into behaviors, understanding behavioral. So very specific ways in which let's understand a certain business outcome and then move back from there. I failed to clinch that deal with that potential partner. I failed. I come back, try and analyze, try and understand where is it, what is it that I didn't do right. And this is peer reviewed. So this doesn't come from King Solomon on a pulpit, okay, saying, this is what you should have done. You get a considered view from a set of people who are facing the same challenges and obstacles that you are in life. Okay? So that makes it peer reviewed, and that makes it that much more interesting, I think. All right, let's move. Now, we also, as I said, there's mapping at the gym level. There's also mapping at an individual level. Now, Lanu Akum is a gentleman we met first 4 years ago in a Dimapur workshop that was sponsored by UNDP. We met him, and I remember the first interaction that I had with him. A farmer's boy, 3,000 farmers, leads a system, and he set up it's there in the back. Lanu, we just wave for everyone, please, thank you. And Lanu, I remember, was really, really quiet through all of that workshop. But then, we had this for 2 days. So the third day, and we were just about to leave. So he comes back, he's desperately looking for something. Right? And I happened to see, Lanu, what are you looking for? He's looking for some of those papers where we were marking out some of his competencies from what we saw. We were just mapping them out on the chart paper. He was looking for that chart paper that had his name and that had his competencies mapped out. And he was looking, and I don't know if you remember this, Lanu, but he said, my goal setting is weak, sir. I realize this. I'm not sure why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's the central theme in the program. Why is it that we do what we do? Crack the why, the how becomes apparent. And with the unraveling of the how, the what becomes apparent. Okay, let's start with the why. Thank you. Manish Kothari comes from... There you go. Thank you very much. Why are you recording this? Manish is an entrepreneur. He's a capital goods manufacturer based in Anand in Gujarat. Now, what might get Manish to work with a Lanu is, if you look at complementarities in behaviors, I mentioned a little earlier about behavioral value chains. Now, if Manish is very high on, let's say, independence and self-confidence as a set of behaviors, and Lanu is weak there, but Lanu has very strong demand for efficiency and quality, and Manish is good with calculated risk-taking, and Lanu is good with, let's say, systematic planning and monitoring, etc. So that would make for a, I've worked on about 100 investment banking projects in my previous avatar in Geneva, out of which just about 2 worked. And I'll tell you why those 2 worked. It's not because we as an investment bank were able to give more data and information that helped the promoters of those businesses understand what it meant for them to come together. It's just because this guy liked the watch of the other guy. Just a great watch. And they went off, they had a drink in the evening, and they were just, it was just about stories. It's because one guy liked the story of the other. That's all it was to it. It really wasn't about the effort. And I was thinking to myself, and I'm scratching my head with all the, my team of people working on the numbers, and crunching, and what is to get to a decision point. And why is it that this business shouldn't be working? Why shouldn't the joint venture happen? And these guys had already worked it all out. Right? So I realized this, that behaviors are extremely important, and when one has this innate ability to recognize that there could be complementary behavior coming from the other side, and that complements my ability to deliver another area, for example. There's magic in there, right? So we do this on an ongoing basis. We examine behaviors. That's what all the programs are about. Right? Quickly, statements of purpose. If you look at some of these statements, they're funny because they're not about where I want to be tomorrow or where do I want to go, what's my direction. It's really about consciousness. It's about why. It's my raison d'etre. It's a reason for my existence. And as I mentioned a little earlier, there are entrepreneurs who struggle to do this even for decades. I've been with this program for about 15 years, and I can tell you that there are entrepreneurs who are struggling. Thank you. All right, so, I have been shown the magic finger from there. So let's quickly, enterprise levels. As I said, behaviors at an individual level, behaviors also at an enterprise level. Various behaviors at an enterprise level, which goes into something called a business plan for an enterprise. Ernst & Young and a few other knowledge partners that are helping us develop this. And this eventually would help us attract investment. Yeah, let's move on. District. And yes, so the programs are available, the slides are available for those who want to. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sri Lanu. Now, I would request Sri Lanu Jamir, Zip Engineering and Innovation Center,